Welcome to my channel, and today we are looking at a very special Seiko Kinetic watch. It's the watch in the center. It's a what would be the second generation of Kinetic watches. This is the first time Seiko watches are taking the Kinetic moniker. Before that, they were just called AGS quartz watches. So you can see Kinetic quartz, but this actually is a Seiko Diver in disguise. So everybody knows, the classic Seiko Diver, like I have one here with, the rotating bezel and the screw down crown. This needs to be screwed back in. And, this particular one has the 200-meter water resistance. And this is an example of a Seiko Diver quartz watch from the 1980s. Again, you have the hallmark of a diver is the screw down crown and pretty significant water resistance. Let's change the date on this. Let's pull it out once again and change the time. Okay. So, and this is where we come to the main point of this video. This Seiko Kinetic watch comes out in 1993, I think, or 94. This was the first time Seiko had started using the name Kinetic in their watches. And of course, this has a one-way rotating bezel, which seems to be, my hands are slippery, so let me. Like any diver with its classic. Yeah, I just have this. I was working on some watches, so I had a little bit of oil on my hand. So, and 150-meter water resistance, which was typical for those days. And most importantly, a screw down crown. Let's adjust the time to say something. So in many ways, if you realize, this crown is the exact crown that they were using in their 1980s dive watches. So the crown persists. It has the same, all Seiko watches which had a certain level of water resistance had the wave logo in the background, just like a dive watch from the 1980s. It's the exact same dive watch. In fact, if you can pop this bezel out and replace it with the regular dive bezel, and you have just the same watch with a different dial and a different bezel would become the classic Seiko Kinetic Diver of the 1990s. That's a highly sought after watch. But I personally like this watch a lot more because of its, this is very descriptive. In those days when the Kinetic watches had just come out, they would say that based on the hour markers, how much hour of power reserve do you have? So the early capacitors watches only had 72 hours of power reserve. Unlike by the next year, I think, when they come up with the 5M43 movement, that's a 5M42, this watch would have had 1 week of power reserve compared to 3 days on this, because they were using these were still capacitor driven watches. These have switched to the lithium cells. But yes, this watch is absolutely a joy to own. It has solid end links, has pretty thick gold plating, even though the gold plating is slightly worn out. You can get this on a black dial. And the best thing about these is you can get these really cheap. These aren't very expensive on eBay, unlike dive watches, which really have gone up in price over the last few years for some inexplicable reason. Like these watches I can now sell for 3 times what I originally paid for them. But of course I'm not selling them, I'm keeping this particular watch. and this watch as well, because these are all like very classic watches for their time, as is the Kinetic for the early 90s. You have the Starfish bezel, which again the later Kinetics, the Kinetic divers would have. This is the first view of that Starfish bezel, but they, by gold plating all of it, they're not, really taking advantage of the legendary Starfish bezel that would show up later. And Seiko, in some ways, is responding to Tag Heuer with its uh, rounded, more organic bezels compared to the sharper coin bezels that you would have in the earlier watches and later watches. So anyway, that was a quick overview of the Seiko Kinetic. Since I have this, let me show you how Seiko had dipped into the parts bin later on. We have a Seiko dress watch there, and you'd realize the index markers are exactly the same, except these have painted to show a nice blue, almost nautical theme. It really almost looks like a yacht timer, and especially with that. And then they start taking the 12 o'clock marker as the classic triangle, which is very typical of dive watches. So yeah, this is a very nice hybrid dress casual stealth diver, and I just have the best things to say about this. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did so, please be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much.